Hey y'all, welcome back to For the Fans, where tonight we are excited to talk about another interesting episode of Survivor 47. We're going to dig into all the interesting things, what happened in the aftermath of the Sierra blindside, the rewards, the punishments, all of the details. Joined today by CJ and My Ass is Too Big, aka Ryan. How are y'all doing?
Good. How you doing?
Marv.
I'm doing fantastic. It's currently 2 in the morning where I'm at. I'm in London right now, but
Don't
from
rub
one
it
island to the
in.
other, Survivor.
Don't
You
rub
made it a
it
point to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. An interesting episode. We've missed the last couple weeks. Sorry, y'all. Life happens when unfortunately we don't get paid for this. So here we are. I'm excited to talk about it. We have had a couple of, I feel like this season is interesting. I'm like engaged every episode and I'm excited when the episodes come on, but I'm not also like, oh my gosh, this is the best episode. But then I hear other people talk and they're like, this is the best episode or the best season of the new era. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. I don't feel like just super drawn to this cast. Maybe like I like all of them okay, but I don't necessarily like love any of them. Sorry, Ryan.
I'm one of those people. I think this is the greatest Survivor season of all time. Like heroes versus villains, what's that? Survivor 47, that's where it's at.
It's funny because I don't like this is my first time on this season because all the Big Brother stuff, but I don't find this cast very likable. Not that I dislike any of them. They just don't stand out. Like they had characters, like Andy is a character, Rome was a character, Teeny is a character, but none of them are like ultimately memorable in the whole like Survivor of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like most of the people that were on this season would have been steamrolled by the great players in other seasons. I don't know if anyone has emerged yet.
Yeah.
Like Teeny, worst Survivor player ever.
I don't think she's bad, but I don't think she's steering any action. There's no strategic mastermind, but there's several people who think they are.
And I think that's all you need in Survivor. You don't necessarily need good players. You just need them to play at the caliber of the other players on the island. Like we saw that in 46. 46 was not necessarily the best season in terms of gameplay, but it was such an engaging, such an entertaining season because everyone's trying to do all these different crazy things. Everybody has their own motives, their own interpersonal relationships. So maybe they're not the most strategic players. They're not the sharpest machetes that we've seen on Survivor, but the gameplay can still be dynamic. The votes are moving in different directions every single time. There's a lot of fluid interactions between the previous tribes, tension within people who are starting on original tribes, which we don't often get. I feel like we get a lot of sort of pagongings even in like the six people per tribe format, and this one isn't that. It's very fluid.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. All right, let's get into last night's episode. We start the episode typical fashion of we got to follow up with the Sierra blindside. Rachel and Sam are left out of the vote. They had no idea what was happening, but Rachel, which, I think she is one of the people, CJ, that you're kind of hinting at there that maybe they could emerge as like this really good player. We see Rachel pull an interesting move last week, and we weren't here last week to talk about it. So let's get into it a little bit this week because we do get confirmation of her thoughts in her move last week.
Yeah. So last week she played her shot in the dark, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and I'm like, there's no reason for you to play your shot in the dark unless you're gauging the reaction. Like you're trying to see if you're safe, or you're hoping that, maybe it works and I actually am safe. Because it's funny in last week's episode, when they were showing the typical scramble before tribal, Rachel says to Sierra, something doesn't feel right. Sierra's like, yeah, it's off. And then there's big dumb Sam over there like, oh, we're fine. We're solid. We're good. And I'm like, listen to your women. Like they both sniff something's wrong. You guys should probably figure this out. And the whole problem was they took Andy for granted. But anyway, we get to tribal. She plays her shot in the dark. She gauges the reaction of everyone, and you see her put her idol in her pocket, but she doesn't play it. So this week we get confirmation, which is exactly what she did. I wanted to see if people shit their pants. Nobody shit their pants, so I knew I was safe. So I held on to my idol, which was great gameplay and probably one of the smartest things we've seen this season.
I mean, not just this season, like this is big brain, like one of the smartest things we've seen in several seasons. Like, did Rachel break the shot in the dark?
Well, it's funny because, like, at the end of the day, the shot in the dark is not as useful as an idol.
Mm-hmm.
So burn your shot in the... I've never thought about it, but when she did it, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Burn your shot in the dark to see if you have to play your idol.
Mm-hmm.
Because you, like, she knew... If she was wrong and the votes were on her side, no one ever would have known. Like, her losing her vote doesn't matter.
Right.
But if she's right, she has a shot at safety. And if she loses that shot at safety, she still has an idol she can use.
Right.
So I think it was great gameplay.
I think one of the brilliantly and almost comical things about Rachel's gameplay is that she's not sneaky. Everything she's doing is very obvious. Like, when she's getting the idol, she's doing it like right in front of everybody, but nobody's paying attention. When she's stealing the rice and putting it in her pocket, she's doing it in front of everybody and she gets caught. Like, when she is grabbing like her idol, you see Caroline at Tribal Council watching her reach into her bag and grab the idol.
Yep.
Because she says, oh, shot in the dark. Caroline goes, oh, that was it. No idol. Didn't happen. So like, Rachel is doing a lot of strategic things in front of people and people are still not seeing it. And I think that's honestly one of the brilliantly comical thing about Rachel's game.
And I think it's funny because, like, we've seen the last several seasons, the people who have been considered very strong threats get chopped at this point in the game. And then you get left with the final three where, like, I don't know, since season 40, a lot of them haven't felt like, I don't know if deserving is the right word, but definitely not the favorites or the people you thought were going to win when the finale started. And Rachel is kind of in that spot right now where no one on the island thinks she's a threat, or they're not talking about her being a threat, but she is a threat and she is playing really hard. And I'm kind of hoping at this point she pulls it off.
I think she's on people's radars, though. She's on Caroline. She's on Genevieve's. So I don't think she's completely under the radar. And some of that, I wonder, even though, okay, obviously, like, she gets caught literally red-handed in the rice situation. And then she has Saul play the safety without power on her. So, I mean, you know, they're not even necessarily like big moves, but they are memorable things from the season. And does that create like a little bigger target on her, even though not necessarily, you know, like, I guess she can say, oh, hey, you know, like, my social game was so great that Saul wanted to give me this advantage. But, you know, like, some of it I feel like she's going to maybe be able to take a little bit of credit for, but why exactly is she a big threat at this point to everybody?
If she was on the wrong side of the vote. She was on the wrong side of the vote pre-merge.
Yep.
Then her ass got saved by somebody else's advantage.
Yep.
And that's that.
Right.
That's all you need.
No. But she is a threat, and I do think she is one of the better strategic players of the season. So interesting. Okay, and we see her. Well, let's talk first about Sam. We kind of see her and Sam have these, you know, necessary conversations that you have to have whenever you've been blindsided, but they approach them from different ways. So Sam, you know, he has his talk with Andy and, you know, kind of a bit of the breaking of the fourth wall where he's like, they're there looking at the camera, you know, like,
yep,
forget this guy. What do y'all think about how Sam handled it?
I think Sam did what he had to do. He was like, I got to pretend like I'm good. I have to maintain this relationship so that at a future moment, maybe you bring me in as a vote, or maybe you continue to try to work with me. Because the last thing you want to do after being blindsided is burn that bridge. Like, you still need to be able to work with those people because the new game is voting blocks. It's not necessarily a dominant alliance that steamrolls people.
Mhm.
So just because you're on the wrong side of the vote tonight doesn't mean you're going to be on the wrong side of the vote tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think something that came really interestingly from Sam and Rachel's conversation is that they see we have to look out for each other, but let's not work together. And I haven't seen that before in a Survivor season. And
Yeah,
you see
where
them
they're like, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Screwed, peace out, I'm going this way, you go that way. And you sort of see that happen in their strategies. They both try to like say, hey, you just blindsided me, we're cool, but they do it to different sides. Sam goes to Lavo and he's buttering up Teeny and Soul. And Rachel goes up to Telugu and is like trying to get with those people. So you see them go different ways to accomplish the same goal. And I think by covering their bases that way, whether it was intentional or not, was also really clever.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if they like, there's a mutual understanding that we're not taking a shot against each other, which means our plan is to make it to final 3 together, even if we're not overtly working together.
Yeah. Like, you know, you're someone that I'm not going to go against, but
Yeah.
you may not be there for everything that I'm doing now. I do think it's interesting because at the beginning of this episode, Sam is like, I am going scorched earth against Lavo. You know, they are the ones that burned me and they've got to go. And Andy, you know, even Andy is an afterthought in his I've been betrayed plan. But we're going to see him flip the script completely by the end of the episode. And so I just thought that was an interesting little point. We see Rachel and Andy have a conversation. And to me, this one feels super, super genuine while also being a complete level of bullshit that I think that we're still at with them. One thing I want to give Survivor credit for is I think they've done some really, really interesting editing this season. And I loved this like back and forth love story between Andy and Rachel, where you're getting both of their perspectives. They're telling about the past. They're telling about the future. I thought this was a fun little sequence here.
I liked it a lot. I think that at the beginning of the game, I did not want Rachel to work with Andy because of Andy's meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
As the season has gone on, I've just liked what Rachel has been doing and have become a fan. Versus Andy, I feel like is Rome light. Like he's also oblivious to everything that's going on, just not to the degree that Rome was.
I think Andy is actually very aware. I think he's bad at sort of like sealing the deal and like making that connection, but he knows what's going on. He sees the dynamics of people. Like he clocked Annika and Rachel. He clocked the feud between Annika and Sam. He's clocking who's working with who. He's seeing that he was on the bottom of Gata. He's very aware. I just think he doesn't know how to take that information and then give it to somebody in a presentable way. Like he gives it in a way that rubs people the wrong way, which is why Rachel is kind of like, oof.
Well, I think Andy's biggest problem is, you know, perception is reality. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Let me see how many little sayings I can throw out there. Andy made such a bad first impression on these people, and not just on his OG tribe, but on everybody, that in a 26-day game, you cannot shake that. And so I think that is part of it where he has been written off a lot. But you do see like Genevieve wanting to have this relationship with Andy. But, you know, a part of you has to be skeptical because you have seen what he did to John in the very first episode. So, you know, I think Andy is like an enigma that I cannot quite figure out. And I'm also confused by his edit. I think Survivor loves him.
I think Survivor loves him too, because I feel like he keeps getting presented as the, I don't know, narrator for this season versus like my wife thinks that he's getting the villain edit at this point. But I don't think he's a villain. I don't think he's coming off as a villain. I just don't think I think he's kind of like a stooge.
It's almost like they don't go together. Like what the players perceive Andy as and what the producers are presenting Andy as do not coincide to me. Like we get like these really big brain crazy confessionals from Andy where, like you're saying, Ryan, like where he's got things clocked, like she's all that moment where, the Rain Man like equation in the first episode, like we're getting a lot of this stuff that makes you like really, really think, like when he is like, oh, well, I've got this master plan against Annika and Rachel. He's getting a lot of credit from the producers. And so like, it has me second guessing myself where I'm like, is Andy going to win? Is Andy going to win?
I've been thinking that the last couple of episodes because of the edit he's been getting, because
like I don't understand the edit versus what the people in the game are saying. And is it just his original tribe? Are they the only ones that really feel that way? I don't know. I don't understand. And obviously we're not at the end of the game to know if Andy even makes it there, but I'm confused.
And it does make me wonder with the edit, if Andy gets there, will he win?
Right. Especially you definitely got a Sierra on the jury. And likely you've got at least 2 other GOTA members. I cannot always remember the names. You got probably at least 3 GOTA on the jury.
Yeah.
Are they going to have changed their opinion about Andy? I don't know.
And I actually really like Andy's edit because of this, because you're seeing what the players think versus what I think. And it's like the difference of perception within self-perception and the perceptions of everybody else. Do I think Andy is making strategic moves? Yes, but I don't think he's like socially strategic. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like he's making a lot of enemies, rubbing people the wrong way. He's thinks of himself sort of as this mastermind. So he's like, I'm a villain, I'm planning all these plots. But then the first member of the jury is Sierra, who now kind of resents him. And like after watching back like the post vote out interviews from Sierra, like last week we got the episode's sequence out of order. Like she had the conversation with Rachel where she was like, this is kind of sus, before she went up to Andy and said, hey, am I still your island sister? Mm-hmm. So that was her saying the vibe is off and I need to check Andy. What's going on? Like she clocked Andy was flipping, and then they flipped it for edit purposes.
So I'm going to say something, Ryan, it's going to break your heart, but I have to say it. Do you think if we combined Andy and Teeny, you would get a very good Survivor player? Because Andy does have a lot of good strategic thoughts, but he has no social game. And Teeny has a phenomenal social game, but is not, I'm not going to say she doesn't have any strategic thoughts, but her strategic thoughts don't carry any weight because nobody goes with them. Mm-hmm. And so if you mesh them together, do we get a really good player? Because they kind of seem to lack what the other one has.
I think if you combine them, you get an obvious player who gets targeted and voted it out. Survivors,
sure, but...
an interesting. I think you have to be bad at something in the era of Survivor.
But I'm just saying, are they like, polar opposites of, you got one that is strategic, but cannot have a good bond with people. Like there's just something missing. And then one that every single person loves, but anytime she has an idea, the others don't want to go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like Caroline's in that same spot where she has ideas, but no one listens to her. So like she's not driving conversations, because the best way to win the new era of Survivor is to be the one driving the conversation without people realizing that you're driving the conversation. And as of right now, before last night's episode, I would have said it was probably Gabe driving the conversation. And after last night's episode, I'm not really sure who's steering the boat.
I think Caroline is a great analogy, though, for like the in-between Andy and Teeny. Because Caroline, she is very strategic. Like you saw her breaking down, like with Tiana, why they need to vote out Rachel, because we can have the other two who's targeted before us. She's into the Lane Alliance where she has a lot of control and influence, but she's not going to be the obvious target of that, and she knows it. When you break down whose names have been thrown out, the only two people whose names haven't been thrown out as like an option to vote seriously are Teeny and Caroline. Everybody else has been like either seriously considered or actually had their name written down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know.
I think she's playing the best game right now, and that's my
Caroline?
Caroline.
Yeah.
I see a lot of ways for Caroline to get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so too. I can see Caroline at the end. I can see Teeny at the end.
Yes.
I don't know.
But if I'm playing, I don't want to sit next to them.
What?
If I'm playing, I don't want to sit next to them.
Right, but I don't know if either one of them have win equity. I don't know. I guess everything's kind of gray and murky.
It's funny because now we're at jury, and I've always felt in previous seasons that like there's a front runner at this point in the season, and for this season, I don't think there is one, so it just feels weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. But you have people front running different things. So like Kyle's front running the challenges completely, but he's not doing super strong in the other aspects of the game. Whereas I think like Genevieve and Caroline are sort of the strategic people who are like running that kind of thing. And Teeny is sort of the social end. And you sort of have these different like polar opposites, and they're different aspects that they're good at and are not good at the other ones, which makes it interesting to see how the jury is going to base their votes off of when they're going to have very different games in the end.
I feel like if we're talking about complete package, right now I'd probably pick Sue as far as good at challenges, doing well socially, playing an underrated game. Because of all the people there, like until last night, she also hadn't came up.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason she came up is because they couldn't target Gabe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on from this. This is going to be the broad spectrum of talking about it. We get the challenge where you're competing in pairs that, you know, you've teamed up with whoever and multi-stage till we get to our winner. I guess this is also a staple of the new era. Nope, look at me. I'm not being negative. I'm not being negative. Okay, this is a staple of the new era.
I love it.
The first 4 people out of the competition are going to lose their votes, but they will have an opportunity to win it back, but they're going to lose it. And there it is. Okay, you're going to go on a journey. You're going to have an opportunity to win your vote back, but you lose a vote. As a general whole principle, how do y'all feel about this?
So I didn't like it when he was introducing it. And then when it played out, I was like, wait, I love this. And the reason that I now love it is because it sort of forced people into different groups where they might not have gotten together with that group of people otherwise. Like, it's hard for people to sort of say, hey, let's all meet as this size group in this particular spot without other people looking at them and going, oh, wow, that's a group over there. Whereas when you're separating them out into these compartments, they're sort of forced to have different conversations with each other. And I think that's how Genevieve and Sue are able to say, hey, we're just sitting here.
So I think that you are spot on. I did like having the 3 separate groups, basically the have-nots, the nothings, and the rewards. But I hate the principle of 4 people possibly losing their votes as far as the other 6 people that are back at the beach think. You know, they're trying to strategically plan a vote, and they don't know what is happening with the other 4 people. And so it discourages big moves. I mean, this ended up being like, sometimes you luck into things bass backwards, and that is what happened with this. They are lucky that it played out how it did, because it should have just been very, very easy of, okay, well, it's Sam. It's like, he doesn't have a vote as far as we know, and even if he comes back and he does have one, we're just going to vote him out. Like, we left him out last time, let's just finish the job. But luckily, that's not what happens.
Yeah, well, in this one, you're going to see 3 different groups. They have to say 3 different names because you have to say something in front of everybody. There's sort of the social standard that you have to say something. So really, in groups of 4, the people who are eating sandwiches can't say any of those people's names. So they have to pick one of the other 6 people. People doing Jenga, they have to pick one of the other 6 people, and then Sue and Genevieve have to pick one of the other 8. So at least 3 different names from 3 different groups have to be out there. And I think it does force a lot of strategic and creative gameplay. It causes that last minute scramble. I agree that like it makes it harder for the players to figure out who they can vote and strategize with because they don't know the numbers. I think that's why we saw the scramble happen so late, because they had to eat sandwiches first and then say, hey, what are we doing? But I think in terms of creating new dynamics within the game, which is something that Survivor struggles to do without making things too twisty, I think this did a good job. Do I like the idea of 4 people potentially losing their vote? No, but it wasn't going to happen that way. It was engineered not to have that happen. But the way it was engineered created new social dynamics, which I think is good win for twists. It's not saying you get an idol, you lose your vote, you lose your vote. It's split into groups. And that's how I really view this twist rather than the consequences of the Jenga game.
Yeah, it's tough because like I like the idea in theory of people can lose their vote because it makes others like you can't be a dominant alliance. You have to work with other people. It goes back to the old we're a solid 4. We made merge as a solid 4. We're going to run this game as a solid 4. And that doesn't happen anymore because now you have people that can lose their votes. You have, the numbers shifting on a day-to-day basis. You always just want to be on the right side of the vote, which cool. But I think that it creates a lot of unnecessary drama. Because like Kiley said, it should have been Sam. It should have been easy. But when it's easy, it's never actually easy. Because I think you still have these same conversations, whether they have their votes or not, of, well, what about Saul? Well, what about Kyle? What about there's still going to be a lot of whatabouts, but you can't make any definitive plans until you figure out who has their vote. And what would have made this worse is if the people who had to compete for their vote didn't know until they got to tribal whether they had their vote or not. That would have been chef's kiss messy. Yeah. And I don't know if I would have been happy or angry about it.
Mm-hmm. I think I feel angry. Like, let's stop having people lose their votes all the time. It's not fun. It's not fun. We've done it. It's played out. Like, just let people vote. Just let them vote. Especially whenever they're not getting a choice in the matter. Like, at least with the beware advantage, okay, you lose your vote if you take this until you have the idol in your possession. They're making a choice. They don't have any choice. They have to compete in the immunity challenge. Why would they have to lose their vote?
Yeah.
Like, they have to compete in the auction. So why does the person, this is weird. Stop doing it. Just let people vote.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If I have to compete and if I lose, I can lose my vote, then I should have the option of sitting out the challenge and not losing my vote.
Right.
I guess the counter argument against that is a lot of people will try to throw challenges to the end. And so that they don't have the targets on them. And it sort of prevents people from being able to throw a challenge. But again, playing devil's advocate to my devil's advocate that's part of the strategic game. They should be able to do that if they want to.
Right. So losing your vote should just be off the table. It's silly. It's played out. We've done it. Let's not keep doing it. But Jeffrey has his vision of the new era locked in. I mean, I have never seen a person like a dog on a bone with what Jeff thinks has to happen with the new era.
It's funny because Survivor 50 is coming up next year or 2026. It's going to be an all-star season. And I'm really curious how they're going to structure it. And if the game will change again after that. If this is going to be like a 5-year blip.
God, I hope so. Can it just go back? Okay.
I want something new. I want it to change again, but I want it to be completely different.
Not me. I'm a purist. Okay.
I mean, I'm really glad that they didn't carry over the Winners at War currency with the fire tokens.
Yeah.
I hated that.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't feel like the fire tokens completely changed the game. What it is to its core. This was just a little gimmicky twist for this season. That's fine. Whatever. I agree. We don't need to see it in another season, and I don't think we will. But some of this stuff that he, no food, 26 days, the stuff that he has like gotten so locked in on, it's not that great. And I don't think that he is someone that necessarily can take criticism very well, because you got to listen to your fan base at a certain point in time. I mean, if everybody in the fan base is pretty much like, hey, my guy, stop taking people's votes away, at a certain point, you have to say, you know what? I should not take people's votes.
Well, like,
I want to do that.
What's her face last season with the hamburger meltdown? Like, that was just uncomfortable. I feel like that was good TV.
I loved it.
I loved that. I loved that. But that is not manufactured. I mean, that happened organically. And
that's fantastic.
They're going to do it. But, like talking about the auction, I mean, we are so off topic here, but it's fine. Like talking about the auction, it's not fun. And I understand that Jeff is like, okay, I had to rework the auction because everybody was just saving for the advantage.
Yep.
I would be fine if if the auction literally was just food or, a bath, toothbrush, whatever. I would be fine if it legitimately never had an advantage in it again, because if you go back to it, everybody has the same amount of money, and you get to see people like, okay, Kyle, he's sitting there, he's trying to get some mac and cheese because he doesn't eat meat, and you see somebody else swap the mac and cheese out from under him because they have more money. Like, that is good, just petty drama that you miss out on by making people bid all of their money for every single item. It's no longer an auction. And so the auction could still be fun. It could still generate things that have game ramifications without having any advantages in it.
It's fair.
Nope,
an advantage in your food, though. That was crazy.
Yeah.
I kind of love the new auction. I'm a new auction stan, but I think we can move on.
I mean, you like the new era, though, and I don't.
I think we're going to see like another shift of decades. Not decades, but like deca seasons. Like, I feel like the 30s, the twist was, what if there was a theme? The 40s is, what if we like played with the advantage? What is an advantage? How do we make it swanky? Or I think the 50s, I think they're going to be like social structural twists. I don't know what that means yet, but I think we're going to move away from this paper says something funny to this group has to do a different dynamic.
I would love to see another One World.
Yeah.
To see how it plays out.
I want One World with 3 tribes. I think that would be great.
That would be cool.
I don't ever want to see 3 tribes again. Okay. Back to last night's episode. So we see the 3 different groups. We see the, separate names thrown out. But kind of what is the most interesting from these 3 groups is we have Genevieve and Sue together back at camp. They're the 2 that don't have a punishment, don't have a reward. And Genevieve is like, Sue, how are you feeling about this? And Sue's like, that motherfucker Kyle, we're fixing to get him. He wrote my name down episode 1, and I'm coming for his ass. And Genevieve is like, okay, that's an idea. Or we could do my idea, which is Saul. Did y'all see this coming?
No. Came out of left field for me.
Me either. I mean, we had Rome tipping Saul off way back whenever he was like, hey, Genevieve wants to cut you. And Genevieve was like, yes, I do want to cut him, but I did not want Rome to tell him that. And so, I mean, we had gotten a little glimpse that this was in Genevieve's mind. But as far as we're shown, Genevieve, Teeny, and Saul are, a pretty tight little group. We see them always having conversations together as a, OG tribe. And so when she throws Saul's name out, I was like, what? Genevieve.
It's funny because I've been watching Genevieve all season, and I feel like she's operating as a lone wolf because she's been like looking for a way to put her fingerprints on the game that is undeniably her. Mm-hmm. So I think her throwing Saul out, she talks about it as being a big move. I don't think it was a big move, but I think she thinks it is. And it's, as you see the conversations happen, especially before the people who, competed for their votes come back, she's getting credit for the idea, which is what she wants. I don't know if that's smart gameplay in the new era.
Yeah. I think Genevieve is a very old school player, and I almost view her and Caroline as similar players playing the opposite strategy. Like, because you see Genevieve, she is trying to do all these like individual things. She says, Rome doesn't have any friends, number one ally. Andy doesn't have any friends, number one ally. And she's trying to find like all the people who are rubbing people the wrong way and pulling them into her voting blocks, which allows her to have a very fluid game. But it also exposes her more. Like everyone's going to say, yeah, this is Genevieve's idea to get out Saul. And now we have 4 Tuku still. Like, we don't need Genevieve for anything else, but she did this one thing. Whereas Caroline is more so, this is my alliance, I'm going to structure it, and I'm going to put myself in all these different meat shields. But you're going to run into the opposite problem where it's like, yeah, you were safe, you made it to the end, but why should I vote for you over the people who did the exact same thing as you? So similar players, 180 in strategy.
And that's the thing is Genevieve is playing right now. We're like, if you had to argue to the jury right now, what was your signature move or what did you do to influence the game? She can at least point at stuff. Caroline cannot.
Yeah.
I really, really like Genevieve. I feel like the last few episodes, like she has really been growing for me. And she is definitely my front runner for who I want to win. I am a little confused as to where exactly she goes from here. Except, comma but, does where she made this move obviously completely separate from Teeny, but in a way, does it shrink a little bit of the target on her and Teeny? Because now something has to be done about the Tuku 4. Because
unless you're the Tuku 4.
Huh?
Unless you're the Tuku 4.
Right, but the other 5 have no choice. They have to take a shot at the Tuku 4 next round. If they don't take out a Tuku member, Tuku has numbers for the rest of the game. Unless somebody loses their vote, which they probably will. But in theory, they have the numbers and they can pick people off. Yes, we see a lot of infighting amongst them, but they have still voted together. That 4 has voted together the whole entire game.
Yeah.
And so by Genevieve sacrificing Saul, not for her and Teeny's benefit, but for her own, does it actually at least propel them one more round? Where at the beginning, we were, Sam is like, they got to go. Lavo's a problem. And now Sam's like, no, they're the problem over there.
Yeah. It's funny because there's cracks. Like, Sue wants Kyle out so bad. But they still work together for the common good. And like you said, we are one vote away from them being even. And based on the fact that Kyle and Gabe have won all of the immunities, it's going to be really hard to take a shot at them.
And Sue.
That's true. When there was 2, it was Sue.
Yeah. So
great point there, Kiley, too. I think like people were going to view the Lavo as a tight 3, whereas Tuku was kind of a dysfunctional 4. So by targeting Saul, I guess Genevieve is like getting that target off of her back, but she's making enemies in the process out of Teeny and Sam. And it's similar to Caroline's point to Tiana about like, yeah, if we stay too strong, it's not you or I getting targeted. They're probably going to target Saul anyway if they target the Lavo 3. So
yeah.
Yeah, maybe, but in Saul's exit press today, he says that like this wasn't a shocking move to him from Genevieve because he said Genevieve recognized where Saul was at in the game and that he did have a good relationship with Kyle. He was working on a relationship with Sam. He, saved Rachel. So like he had good relationships kind of with everybody and Genevieve really recognized that. So Saul may have been a target later down the road. And if they did come for one of them, it may not have been him. So I don't know. I mean, I think I would have liked the move better from Genevieve if she had clued Teeny in. But at this point, I don't know exactly how Genevieve navigates it. And until last night, she was my winner pick for, asterisk, my winner picks have been voted off. And so I was like, okay, Genevieve is going to take this. Like, I see it from her, and I really like her mind. I like how she operates. I think she's super, super interesting. She's very Parvati coded. I cannot get over it. And so I think she's very dynamic to watch, but I'm like, oh, I hope this wasn't a mistake.
It's funny.
Now she's on Teeny's enemy list. It's a big mistake. Teeny's going to be on that war path. Yeah.
Well, if we move to number 3, I think if Genevieve tips Teeny off, then Teeny's blowing up the spot the same way Sam did. Because I think Teeny immediately goes to Saul, and then Saul starts going to the people that he has relationships with, and then I think it becomes Saul versus Genevieve at that point.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Does Genevieve leave Teeny out too because Teeny would not have done it? And does she recognize, like, hey, I cannot bring Teeny in on this. I don't necessarily want to blindside Teeny, but Teeny's not going to go for Saul. So therefore, Teeny cannot be involved in this.
Yeah, and I think it worked out better for Genevieve this way because Teeny did find out about it. Because she didn't find out about it from Genevieve, she said, oh, whose vote do we need to make it not happen? Genevieve. Tried to pull in like Genevieve, Andy, Rachel, all the people who were sort of like leading the soul vote. So
yeah,
it's funny watching the scramble because if they would have never told Rachel the plan, then I don't think you get the chaos that ensued anyway. Because Sam was able to deduce based off of Rachel looking out for him what was going to happen. And then he immediately goes and tells Saul.
Yeah, so this is where I think it's super interesting, and where Genevieve also misplayed it a little bit last night, is she lines pretty much everything up. She was going to do it with the 2 coup members. That would have been enough. But when Caroline loses her vote, she has to have one more. And she's like, you know what? My buddy Andy, that's who I can lock in. And so she has the conversation with Andy, and Andy is like, ooh, interesting. You let me know if you have the numbers, and then I will be on board for that. All she has to do is spend 30 minutes away from Andy and then come back and be like, I've got the numbers. Here we go. And she didn't ever have to tell
I just lost
my connection for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. But I agree with you where, like, if she would have just said, hey, I have the numbers, I'm going to go confirm, goes and, like, scrubs in the ocean or something, or checks tree mail, she can come back to Andy. I have the numbers. We have 5. Caroline's vote doesn't matter. It's 5-on-4. And we're golden. And, like, that's probably the best way to play it. But Genevieve is trying to increase her equity long term, I'm guessing, by trying to clue in Rachel. Like, I think if anyone was trying to go female strong at this point, I think it's Genevieve. So I think bringing in Rachel is part of that, and having Andy as like her puppy as she takes out the other dudes is probably her plan. But I think that, like, it caused a lot of unnecessary chaos in this previous episode.
But I think the chaos came from the Sam Rachel conversation, not necessarily anything that Genevieve did. It was Sam being able to say this or this, that or that. How about this? And, like, what's Rachel going to do when he gets literally the entire plan correct?
Actually, when Sam did that, I gained a lot of respect for him as a player, because I thought that he was kind of like, I'm the dude, I'm in control, everything is fine. And now watching him work from the bottom and being able to deduce a plan just by Rachel saying there's stuff in motion and I can't tell you what it is, and he quickly puts 2 and 2 together. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very fun. I loved Sam doing this. I am 100% a fan of always blowing shit up if all else fails. And so Sam is like, you know what? Like, there's a decent chance that they're lying. It's going to be me or it's going to be Saul. Like, I don't have any say in this. So let me just try and completely shift what's happening. And so he misreads it a little bit because, he's like, oh, me, Andy, Rachel, and the Lavos, we together can take out a big threat. Sue. And CJ, I do like where you have pointed out, like, okay, Sue does have some of these very good things going for her. I don't see Sue as our winner. And so when he busts out the name Sue, I had to do a double check. What? We're going for a big move and we're taking out Sue?
Yeah, why not Kyle?
Why not Kyle? And I mean, I can understand it from Sam's perspective of, I'm going to keep Gabe and Kyle in front of me. And Saul, like all three of y'all, because you look at Sam, he's young, he's athletic, he is what is typically considered like an immunity threat. So I think for him, it's probably good. It's just the fact that he was like, I'm taking out a big threat. I'm taking out Sue, the 45-year-old grandmother.
Yeah. I think his read that Sue is a big threat is actually spot on. And that's one thing that I really like about the season is they're saying, like, let's target the non-obvious threats, acknowledging that these are some of the people who win the game in the new era. I think him pointing out that Sue's tightly aligned with everyone, she's the crux of the Tuku alliance, is spot on. But the problem is because she's so well insulated, it's not really a last-minute scramble plan that you can do. You have to, if you're flipping it, you have to flip it on the easiest person so you can get people who do it with you. Yeah. So it would have had to be Kyle.
Right.
Yeah. But do you think, and this is a thought experiment, had he successfully taken out Sue, do you think Caroline stays with Kyle and Gabe? Because I felt like Sue was kind of that linchpin for Caroline, and I think she would kind of float to whoever. Like, I don't think she's floating to power, but I think she's going to float to what is best strategically for her, and being with Kyle and Gabe isn't it.
Yeah, I feel like outside of Sue, I feel like based on what I've seen, Caroline's closest connections are Teeny or Genevieve. Opposite sides of the game, but I think those are the people who I can see her working the best with.
Yeah. And that's why I think we might actually end up with a successful women's alliance, because it's not one that they're actively talking about, but they're all of the women are loosely working together to some degree.
Teeny, Genevieve.
Yeah, that's gonna be hard to get together. All right, so we see Sam tip off Saul. Hey man, it's you tonight. And Saul is like, wait, what? Me? And last minute tries to do some scrambling where, he's throwing out Sue's name. They're throwing out Kyle's name. I mean, the last 15 minutes before they went to tribal had to have been so chaotic. I would have loved to have been there because there were so many names floated around in that little bit. Wow.
Sun is setting.
I would say it made my head spin, but it was good TV.
Yeah.
The soul is setting.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part, is they're like, we have to go to tribal soon. And you could see it getting darker on the beach. And you're like, this really went to the last minute this time, which, like, compared to the Rome boat, where Rome was convinced that they were doing this blindside and everyone else was like, it's Rome. And I was like, is CBS trolling us and we're actually going to get blindsided and it's not going to be Rome? This time I was like, oh, it's pure chaos and no one knows what's happening.
Yeah. My husband was like, who do you think's going home? I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea who is going home. Question mark. And I think that a lot of them went into tribal council too, as what are we doing? So much is thrown out. We don't typically spend a lot of time talking about tribal council because it's usually pretty straightforward in terms of one of the people that has been thrown out, which one is it going to be? But we get in typical Jeff questions, he's going through it all. And Saul's the first one that's like, my ass is on the line. I am getting up off of this stump and I am going to have some conversations. And we have a live tribal. I like a live tribal.
I do like live tribals, but I don't like that you can't follow everything that's going on because it's so many whisper conversations. So the camera's not like in there giving you the information. Right.
I can understand that. I did think it was interesting because we never got we were getting lots of little tidbits of like Gabe telling his Tuku people, like, it's fine, we're good. You know, he was the reassuring one. Sue is a little worried, like, do you hear my name out there? And so we get a little bit of that. And then we're also obviously getting like what Saul's doing, what's Teeny doing, what's Sam doing. Rachel is whispering throughout this whole entire thing. She is not subtitled one time. So we never get an idea of what is happening with Rachel. And I was like, whatever Rachel is doing is what is happening. And why won't they show us what she's doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. From my little birdie, I know a bunch of things that were said at Tribal Council that did not make the episode because it would like be a dead giveaway of who was going home. But the spiciest thing that I heard is that in an exchange between Teeny and Genevieve, Teeny found out from Andy that it was Genevieve's plan to get at Saul, and there's basically no way they could have the numbers even if they did vote with Saul. So Teeny walks up to Genevieve and says, "Are you really doing this to me again?" So
wow,
spicy.
Well, hopefully we get the fallout of that, and maybe to even make next week's episode. And
hopefully.
I heard in Saul's exit press that he did say Teeny told him that it was Genevieve that. He knew that it was Genevieve that had orchestrated all of this. I was kind of hoping maybe in all of this chaos, this doesn't end up getting pinned on Genevieve, and she could just be like, "How did this happen? I can't believe it." But we all voted together, no big deal. But that's not going to happen. Teeny knows, everybody knows this was Genevieve's move. Were y'all shocked ultimately to see it be unanimous? 8-1, I guess.
No.
No.
I say no because from what we've talked about earlier in the episode, Genevieve let in too many people on the plan. And once everyone knows the plan, instead of it being like, let's make sure we blindside this person, it becomes, let me make sure I'm on the right side of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So I think true blindsides are the votes that are like marginal, where only certain people are in on the plan and they're the ones that succeed. And then you have 2 or 3 people left like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, like what happened the week before with Sierra.
Exactly. That was a true blindside. Even though they knew something was off, they couldn't pinpoint it. This would have been a true like Annika level blindside of I had no idea it was coming.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this vote out felt like a vote out in Big Brother, where like it's a blindside up until right before the vote, and then everybody knows, so they vote with the house.
Yeah, like all week long, we've gotten this blindside, and then once the cameras are down for them to practice the live show, somebody tells one of the 2 nominees that they are the one that's going home and they're being backdoored. Like, you ruined it. Rachel ruined it by telling Sam, and Sam completely ruined it by blowing it all up, which it was fun because we would not have had the chaos. However, I mean, it's gonna have interesting ramifications, and I do feel like the game is very fluid and it is very open, and I don't know what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. I like it was a unanimous vote and still very chaotic, which is something we don't often get. Normally in Survivor, the vote is unanimous. It's because everyone's like more or less moving the same way, whereas this one is like,
we got to get Rome out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, overall, I think it was a fun episode. I'm interested to see next week what the fallout is between Genevieve and Teeny, what Sam is able to weave together. If he kind of sticks with Rachel, is Rachel pissed at Sam? Like, hey, my guy, I told you not to blow up my spot, and you literally did the exact opposite. There's lots of fallout from this that I feel like, very much like almost like a Big Brother double eviction episode of, we need a lot of, okay, this is what I was thinking in the moment type of confessionals.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
Yeah, I think they need to go back and record it, because like I would have loved to get a in the moment of Saul, because I don't read exit press, so I'm never going to know what his thoughts were unless I go seek that out. But that's something that definitely needs to make the episode, and it's not going to resonate by the time we hit the finale and we've had 5 other blindsides.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was chaotic, and I think this will probably be. I couldn't imagine a more chaotic tribal this season, and if there is, I'm going to love every minute of it.
It's because it's the greatest season ever.
It's like I said, it's not even. I mean, I think it's a good, solid season. I'm slightly rooting for Genevieve over everybody else, but it's one of those things that I'm not actively rooting against any of them, and I'm not very hardcore dying for anybody to win. So maybe it makes it more enjoyable of let's just take whatever each week throws at us and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, there's no one this season that if they get voted out, I'm not watching anymore. I don't feel that way about anyone this season, and I felt that way about other seasons, which I say that, and then I still watch anyway because I love Survivor. But there were people that I would ride for. There's people that over the course of the season, I'm like, I like them. I'm going to follow them on Instagram or whatever. And I haven't encountered that yet.
Yeah.
Well, you guys know I don't have any favorites on this season at all. Definitely not a total teeny stand. That'd be ridiculous. It's like, is she the greatest Survivor player of all time? Yes. But would I care if she got voted out? Okay, a lot, but still.
All right. Well, it will be interesting. We will see what happens next week. Anything else about this week's episode or thoughts overall on the season?
Go Rachel.
Go Teeny.
Go Genevieve. All right. We will be back next Thursday to talk about the latest episode. So we will see all of you guys next time. Bye, y'all.